Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Wellness North Counselling. I'm so excited because today I have my dear colleague, my friend, Parminder with us. And I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I have my notes here, just telling everyone who is Parminder, what does she do. So she goes by pronouns she and her. And I should also acknowledge the lands where we are. We are on Quantum Nation, where I am. I'm not sure, Parminder, what land acknowledgement you would like to add in.
Like I'm in the Kite First Nations land.
So we honor the land we are on. We are settlers. And as I was talking about Parminder, she's founder of Healing Heart Counseling, and she has diploma in transpersonal therapeutic counseling from Clear Mind International Institute. And she's person of color, born in Vancouver. She has a designation of registered therapeutic counselor, and she supports clients that have experienced racial trauma or trauma in the family system. I will add everything about Parminder in the details below. So if anyone who's watching this is interested, you can get in touch with her to work with her or to get some resources. And she does a lot of work, just like I do. And we have talked about this off camera so many times. Like, we want to reach to our South Asian community, talk about things that are not openly talked about, and destigmatize mental health. So we are both very passionate about trauma work. So that's the topic we connected on. And we thought this would be a great way to reach out to community and just discuss our thoughts, what we've seen in our clinical work, and just share some information with folks out there. So if you're watching this and if you find this content interesting, do subscribe to the channel, share this video with friends and family members, and reach out to us with any additional questions. So Parminder, if you're ready, let's just jump into it. So tell us a little bit more about you, your journey of trauma work. What do you think is trauma?
Yeah. So I guess we should give a little trigger warning, just in case a story we share might cause someone like a trigger. So a warning to everyone watching, just be mindful. The conversation is a little bit heavy, and I just want to thank Aditi for having me here and to have this conversation, and my own personal journey when it comes to being a counselor, comes from my own experience in my own family system. And I didn't really think about training as a counselor until 2017, so way in my late 40s. But a profession I always thought about, but I never thought like I'd be good enough. And that, goes into play with my family system, hence I'm so passionate about family systems, is just like my own system. It doesn't support education, men or women. Like, you work hard, and then you have a stable job, and schooling isn't really a priority. So I've always struggled growing up with or even as a young adult going back to school.
You put it beautifully that, we have sometimes this inner narrative that we are not good enough, but deep down through our own lived experiences, we have this feeling that we want to help others, right? So we get into this profession of helpers, and we all have our own journey. Like, we've all done our own therapeutic work in order to create that space for others so that they can go through their journey. And I love the name of your organization, right? So it's wonderful. So what do you think, Parminder, is trauma? When we say the word, what is it? Like, there is still misconception. People think it's like a big thing, like, or war, right? So
So trauma, good question. Trauma could be something very light. It could be when you're a child, your mom went to take out the garbage and you were left in the kitchen and you thought she was never coming back, but in turn she came back. But that could be traumatizing, to trauma being witnessing like a parent being beaten, or seeing some violence. Like, so both of those incidences would create the same level of trauma for each person. So no one's trauma is like more harder. We will see it as it looks more difficult. And we always, obviously, violence hurts, but someone that has the trauma from just a parent making a mistake of walking away could have the same level of impact on a child.
Yeah, it's sometimes like, if parents were working all the time and children were left alone by themselves, that can be very traumatic for some children as well. And it's like depends on what's going on for them developmentally, what's in their genes, and what kind of environment they are raised in. So many factors go into it. So I totally agree that it could be anything that the system cannot handle, and can be traumatic for a child not to have their parent around, and being just left alone when parent is just putting that garbage outside.
And they don't know that they're coming back.
So what have you seen in your clinical work? What can trauma do to a person?
So I've been focused on South Asian community. And my focus is just because of my own experience. Like, my father had an addiction to alcohol. Like, he's sober today, 25 years sober, but it caused a lot of chaos. When you grow up in a home with addictions, everyone's chaotic, and you never know what's gonna happen next. So so I feel really honored to be able to support in our community, because addictions can be rampant, and especially no one talks about alcohol as an addiction.
No, in our Punjabi community, I feel that it's so normalized that, but when it crosses that, adaptive and becomes maladaptive, and then it's creating chaos in the home environment, that's where, it becomes
and no one talks about
families.
But no one talks about it. The woman's taking the man home and he's hanging off of her. And it could be the other way too. Women also have addictions. I don't want to just say men. And if I say men, it's in my system, men have addiction to alcohol, but not all systems are like that. So if I lean that way, it's because of my own experience, but I'm not trying to say everyone is like that. Every man is like that.
We can generalize, but we absolutely bring our own lived experiences into the mix. What else do you see in your work in terms of what happens to these adults when they've grown in family where there was dysfunction, or when there was so much chaos?
So a few things I've noticed, particularly young adults, they have a hard time being vulnerable. In session, they may not, if they have tears, they'll wipe them and be, oh, I'm sorry. And I always tell my clients, tears are welcome. And underneath the tears are even more feelings. And but the client will be like, no, it's weakness, and I feel stupid that I'm crying. And so it's a really slow process. So you can't force someone to cry. So I tell them it's okay, however your process is, I'll hold you in this space. Another thing would be avoiding feeling, coming in for support, and then talking about a million other topics in the session besides what you need for support. So then, as a counselor, I have to be stop the client, and then just focus on the one topic, because it's easy to kind of get all over the place. I've had to kind of learn to do this, because at first, when I first started practicing, I'd be I'm bouncing all over the place, and I took it to supervision, and then the counselor, my supervisor, was like, okay, just focus on one topic, bring them in. So so really a difficulty accessing feeling. And then there's rage, but it's in the body, so there's body pain. So that comes, somatic work comes into that, because people don't know.
And like you're mentioning, they are avoiding their feelings. No one gave them permission to talk about those feelings, so they've developed this pattern that they're avoiding talking about it, but they know something's off and I need to talk to someone, and they're just, not sure. So it's our duty to bring them back and let's just focus on, one lane at a time, as opposed to, going from one thing to the other.
Yeah. And the other, like this is a great question. The other thing I've also noticed is clients may not realize that their a relationship with their parents isn't like balanced or safe for them.
Yes.
So for example, if the kid who's in their 20s, maybe they ran a red light and the police got them and they got a ticket and the parent was with them. Oh, that's my rice.
Okay.
So
all right, there's a little bit of a rice thing, but it's settled now. We are back.
okay, yeah. So let's say a parent was in the car and they got pulled over, they'll never let them forget it. Don't drive to, like, a year might go by and it's like you're gonna get caught by the police. Don't drive too fast. And it could be with that, it could be with selling like fireworks that are illegal and getting caught, and then the parent just never has compassion. Yeah, so I've seen that cycle.
Again and again. Yeah.
Pardon?
It almost seems like parent is just nagging the child again and again, hoping that the child will learn, not giving them any kindness or compassion.
Yeah, because that doesn't happen, then there's a level of anxiety. So, for example, like the one with that ran the light and let's say got a record, they're gonna worry about if they're gonna look for a job, if there's a record on their, on their motor vehicle branch, and because there's no compassion at home, they're always going to be ruminating and having a lot of shame regarding that. So lack of empathy for the children in the systems, I've noticed that, and I relate to that too.
Totally. Yeah. And, in some cases, what I've seen is that parent is too dependent on the child, right? Like, in some, like, for example, if parent is not familiar with the system, they will depend on the child, and child was 10 at that time and now 20. So it's like parentification has happened.
Oh, yes.
Parent has taken the role of a child, and child had to be parent when they needed a parent, right? From years old, they've been taking that family responsibility. South Asian families are complicated. Like, there is so much stuff that happens, which, I think sometimes Western psychology doesn't address. Do you see, Parminder, in your work, sometimes relationship difficulties, like these young adults are facing relationship difficulties because of how their childhood has been?
Yeah. Like, so for example, when it comes to men, they'll have difficulty even knowing what a feeling is. So, if they really are wanting to try really hard, like meditation, like some of those kind of processes are helpful. Otherwise, I find it it's harder with men, just because they just don't even know feeling. When it comes to women, they also have that difficulty accessing feelings, but women are socialized differently. So they're, able to things do come up for them. Yeah, sorry, can you just ask that question one more time?
I was just wondering, like, what kind of relationship difficulties do you see people facing after trauma? Yeah.
So some couples, most of these, both sides, every system, not just South Asian, every system has had trauma. So, and relationship difficulties are due to difficulties in the system. And so couples, like, if it's a very misogynistic system, then, the woman is a pleaser, and then the husband is like just wanting everything done their way. That would be very hard for the client if the partner isn't willing to go for counseling. And the women get depressed. Whoever like is being very controlling, their partner would become very depressed because they feel really helpless. And what I try to do is just like support them, tell them to do joy, create joy, make healthy relationships, like friendships, so they have a support system.
Yeah, things outside their marriage, like don't be
Yeah.
just dependent on your husband, but like once you recognized as one partner is, you are saying unhappy, it's it's a red flag. Let's do something about it. Let's fix things. And many times I feel, Parminder, like these couples who are struggling either don't have healthy role models, they don't have anyone to go by. They always saw their parents interact a certain way, right? So that
Yeah.
impacts, right, like their own attachment style affects them, or sometimes those conversations never happen, right? That emotional language was never taught, so they don't even know
No.
what's going on, what kind of pattern we are stuck in.
Yeah. And even like as you're saying that, even like if the partner who's depressed, if they go to their parents, they'll be like, oh, I stuck it out, just stick it out.
Yeah,
You got a couple of young kids. So it's like the partner is suffering can't go to their parents.
exactly. They have to suffer more, which is like, it is sad situation. Like if someone is expressing their feeling, that feedback should be taken into consideration. There has to be some conversation, like how do we navigate this?
Yeah. It's really like it's so hard because it's like the family doesn't even know what support is. So it's really, really hard to be even critical because it's like, oh, they don't even know, the parents don't even know what support is because they never received support. They had difficulty. So it's almost like having compassion for the parents, like, and being like, okay, if you can't lean in that space, find a space where you can lean and create like emotional close relationships, like friendships, do things you like to do, like, and you enjoy.
Yeah, like self-care and self-compassion, like take that inner journey. I was also going to mention that sometimes I've seen that people who are suffering, they won't share it with their family members because they don't want to burden them, right? Like that guilt, right? Like that guilt is
Yeah.
sometimes ingrained in us, like culturally,
Yeah.
we were raised, right? Like we keep
Yeah.
things in that.
Yeah.
That's what trauma does. We feel that we are the only one who's suffering and we are alone in this, that no one will understand.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. A lot of times, yeah, like, yeah, men or women won't go to their parent and ask for help. And by the time they come into our space, a counseling space, they've been suffering for years because they didn't know that they should reach out for support. Um, a lot of times, like, because there's a stigma, right, of having support, like, oh, there's something wrong with you. You're mentally not well. You're not even a mentally well person that you need counseling. Um, like, yeah, so that would be a barrier. Like the cultural part of like, the look at mental health as something's wrong with you is definitely a barrier.
Totally, yeah. So if you can go to the doctor for a knee bruise, why not go to a doctor when your heart is hurting?
Yeah, no, exactly. Or, people get scans. They'll, like, if they're having anxiety, they'll go to the doctor for medication, or can you do a scan on my heart? Can you do a full body scan? And we're not addressing the relationship difficulty. A lot of times people are having relationship difficulties, but they're avoiding even
Talking about,
going there. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's stress, right? Like our doctors, I feel that they are burdened, like they have so much influx of everyone suffering. They only have
Yeah.
5 minutes to really deal with a
Yeah.
patient. So they are trying to give them medication, get them off and out the
Yeah.
door, as opposed
Yeah.
to about what stressors are actually there in their lives. Um, and I feel that sometimes people will get stuck in self-soothing behaviors. Like what do you think of that?
Yeah, so yes, yeah, I was thinking about that. So self-soothing behaviors, would be like trying to numb, like if they're feeling like stress, trying to numb the pain. So maybe taking weed, like nowadays a lot of young people are vaping just to kind of calm themselves down. Like in the long run, there's a detriment to your health. Or shopping, that could be like another piece. Feeling the endorphins go down once you buy, few $1,000s worth of stuff. or gambling, like something happens like in the brain that it soothes the person.
Totally. And it's like momentarily, ultimately, someone has to pay that credit card bill, right? Or gambled away the money that was for, groceries or whatever. Yeah, we are trying to self-soothe when, in the moment it might seem like a good idea, but then,
like there's like you're going to cause financial losses, you're going to cause burden to your health. And like some people might be promiscuous, so you're going to make it, really hard on your health, like, or you could catch a disease. There's so many like levels of like, sometimes people drive really fast. They want to race because they want to get that adrenaline going. And like, that's very dangerous. So there's, lots of different behaviors people just do because
risky behaviors, totally. Yeah.
Yes, risky behaviors.
So how do you work with these folks? Like, what are some of your tools and tips if someone is struggling with, so much going on in their life, or these behaviors that are not helpful and getting them in trouble? How do you work with them?
So I try to actually identify where that behavior comes from. So my background is, transpersonal psychology. So which is like, for example, going into someone's like childhood and seeing where did this start? Where did the fear, or like there's a rejection, like the person, the adult is acting out from a child's place. There's a pain. So I usually try to explore, well, where did this begin? Sometimes people can go into really young childhood, like 4 years old or 5 years old, where, maybe they were yelled at or their needs were not met. And then fast forward to today, they're trying to fulfill their needs, or there was pain. Maybe a parent left when they were like really young, and they don't know that every time something really traumatic happens, they just drink. Like they'll drink and then they will then suffer after, like maybe get caught. So I help identify when it starts, and the reason with that is connecting that young child that had the trauma and having the adult part, because today we're adults, and trying to have the client understand that, okay, there's this young part of you that's still struggling.
Yes, that inner child work becomes so useful in such cases. And, look, we are talking about going back. And I feel sometimes there is that genetic component, right? Like our ancestors and intergenerational trauma. And I know you are very much into, that racial trauma. Like what do you think of that generational?
So for example, if a pain is never addressed, then it's gonna kind of continue, and you're gonna have heightened level of anxiety. So for example, like I have lots of examples of like racial and family system trauma. So the racial trauma experience in my system would be like colonial, like from India, British India, from my maternal side and paternal side, and coming to Canada. My great grandfather came to Canada in 1907, and just really not being accepted as equal human being as a European settler. I feel like I'm really vigilant. Like if I don't act out like if I'm in public and stuff, but I really notice how people treat you differently. And I've experienced racism as a child, like overt racism, growing like where I grew up in a small town back in the 70s. So I'm pretty sensitive to like racial trauma. And as a counselor, I also had an experience in a workshop, which, I've talked about quite a bit. where I was like, kind of just because of my name, that I was kind of pinned as a Sikh person, and also a reference, like I didn't understand the workshop facilitator used a Bible reference, and the fact she never believed me that I didn't know Bible references, and she thought I should know Bible references because of my Sikh background, which I didn't tell her. See, so she made all these assumptions, and in the end, like I was kind of like, I blanked out in that moment, because I was like, oh, like she keeps questioning me, and like I was just kind of thinking, oh, I keep answering her honestly and she keeps questioning me. And I had a trauma experience at the end, like hours later. I was like, and I didn't even know what was happening. Like I was like really like crying, and I called the woman that invited her, and she didn't help me. She was also like a white woman, and it just changed my practice. I really lean in on people of color, I feel, or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and have compassion. Like I learned that there's so many disadvantages for people, counselors like myself or you, just because of the color of our skin, our names. We may not be put on a platform, and the other piece would be, we wouldn't even have an opportunity, because in school, if you're taunted and told to get out of the, go home, how are you gonna have a good education? Because it's like this thing is constantly happening. And in my case, in my system, education wasn't important. So there's like lots of things I feel against myself personally growing up.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and being so vulnerable and being open, and hopefully someone else can relate to it. Like, even when I came as as an immigrant in 2005 as a settler, I'm sure like many people can relate, like as much as government is trying to be supportive, there's always some kind of a bias, whether it's implicit or explicit. So being aware of that is so important, and we have to do our own work so we can hold space for people who are coming in and have had those experiences.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that too, even the paperwork is not for people, like they're for European people, like any paperwork, because they know how to fill it out. Someone like that's an immigrant from India, or like I'm just gonna use India just because that's my background, they'll have difficulty filling out the paperwork because it's not for them. Like a lot of stuff is not made for, it's made for a white lens, and I mean, I feel like I in a way benefit because I can see from both lenses. So I feel like we both probably have a specialty in, because of the experiences we've had.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think, if someone is ready for some therapeutic work, or what are some ways they can start to take care of themselves? Like, once these things that were hidden are now coming up for them, and they're like, okay, wait a minute, something is off. Like, what are some of your tips or strategies or words of wisdom for people who are ready for,
Yeah, I think it's good to, like, for example, like if your people, it's like stuff is coming up for someone, always like try to have a safe person to talk to. Or if you don't have a counselor, maybe like acquire a counselor. And if you are not working, you're below the poverty line, there's lots of groups, nonprofits. I mean, unfortunately, there's wait lists, but there are places where there's low paying sliding scale counseling.
Totally, yeah. And
Also,
that exactly, Parminder, spoke to me. Like, that's what I was noticing, that there were a lot of wait lists, a lot of these free resources. So we started like having some student counselors at our practice who can support these people with no wait list. Like, if someone needs mental health help, they need it now. They can't wait 6 months, right? So yeah, this is really good. Starting by, like you said, connect to someone, whether it's a safe person, a friend. Like, don't keep it in. Share.
Share, like keep talking. And also I think it's good to do like reflective writing,
Yes.
writing about your thoughts and processing your thoughts. So journaling is good to do. But it's good to start with someone, like if you don't have a safe person at all, it's good to connect with someone that has a bit of specialty that can hold you in safe space, and the right counselor. Like I wouldn't suggest to someone, oh, just see any counselor. No, you have to pick someone that
Yes.
feels right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are involved in so many initiatives, like, you're always out there doing work. So tell us about all these beautiful initiatives that you are involved with.
Yeah, so I'm actually currently I'm supporting, or I go to these young women. They have a group. It's called Let Her Talk, and they have difficult conversations about social issues in the community. I attended one of their first talks in the winter last year, and they had invited a a physician from Ontario who's doing a study in Punjabi women and menstrual cycles.
Yes.
Like, did your mothers ever talk about your menstrual cycle? And then they had another talk just in January about misogyny, patriotism. And yeah, so they continue to have, like, then they also had a financial like trauma, being a female, like in the South Asian community. As I say that, there's a mix of people. There's South Asians, there's also some people from the continent of Africa. So they're all young women, and it's really amazing. Like I'm thinking, I wasn't able to have conversation when I was a young woman, and I feel really proud to sit in the space with them, because it's
Yes.
like, oh, these girls, these ladies are like amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. And so are you, right? Like you've done incredible work in your own way. That's phenomenal. What's your self-care? Any self-care tips for us, for the audience?
Well, I like to do yoga and mindfulness yoga, eating healthy, and I'm always, because of the work I do, I also, like when it comes to mental health, I also I embrace my work. So I'm always like mindful of, okay, if I'm triggered or what's going on, I know how to use my tools. So I use my tools, like either journaling or like hugging, or self hug, eating healthy, healthy relationships, connecting with family, and also downtime, like really like cherishing downtime and not feeling guilty about it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a tough one, right? Like we are so conditioned to be productive all the time. Just taking time to relax and vacation seems like we should be doing something.
yeah. So
It's
so
so
those are,
wonderful, wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation, Parminder. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll connect again at some point. Everyone, thanks for joining us. We will be putting this conversation and everything about Parminder in the chat box. You can give us any comments, share the video with others, and we will connect with you soon. So do subscribe to our channel as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Parminder.
Yeah, okay.